Are you leaving here on time? I looked up to see Barry Masters, my employer, looking into my office. He had the same goofy grin he always had when he came to my place for dinner. He relished telling my wife that he was going to screw her. I think I should start from the beginning. My name is Bill Jackson. Minsky pronunciation Jackson Minsky. Most people know me as Billy Jack or simply Jacko. I am a 35-year-old account executive who has worked for a short period. An advertising agency in Houston, Texas. Being an account executive in one of the huge New York or Los Angeles agencies would imply a lot of power, responsibility, money, and respect. At Beam & Sons, it simply means that I manage everything while Barry sits on his fat rear and reads those horrible bodice ripper novels, as if reading these books made for lonely and bored housewives wasn't bad enough. He needs to pleasure himself after reading the love scenes. So here's this jackass in my office, wondering if I'll be out on time, despite the fact that he knows I will. Since he hired Amy, an intern with an impressive collection of jugs and a bomb to match, leaving the office on time has not been a problem, but since tonight was the night, I told him I had a few things to accomplish and will be out in half an hour. Fine, I will go eat at the Royal Fork, but I expect you and Lynn to be ready when I arrive. And Jacko? I mean, ready. Lynn was to be nude, while I was to wear my chastity device. I know most males would not consider me a true man, but I do what I need to do to survive. 10 years ago, I met my wife, Lynn, at a Christmas party hosted by a local bank. They were Barry's largest customer, and their loyalty to us was largely responsible for keeping the agency afloat, as I was the primary account manager. I was invited to the party as well. Lynn worked as a teller at their drive-up-only location. I spent the evening making small talk with several of the personnel I knew from previous interactions with them. I was talking with the loan department manager about a golf outing they had scheduled for just after Christmas. It seems that his typical partner was going through a difficult divorce and had been beaten with his own clubs. Since Barry closed the workplace from Christmas Eve to New Year's Day, I agreed to play while chatting golf with the group that was attending the golf outing. I started to notice a few women flocking towards our small gathering. We were talking about our handicaps when a well-developed blonde spoke up. "Hello, Bob. Why haven't any of the tellers been invited to this outing?" She was dressed in the proverbial tiny black dress. Her bosom was genuinely stretching the confines of the bodice, and my gaze was fixed like a hawk on a field mouse. When she inquired, "So what's your handicap?" I nearly didn't realize she was speaking directly to me. Now, I am not a neurosurgeon or an expert on the activities of the human brain, so I can't explain why the only word that came out of my mouth in response to her golf inquiry was fantastic. Jugs. Guffaws of laughter rang out from everywhere. I could feel my cheeks growing red. "That's funny," someone said. "Darn, why can't I come up with unique answers like that? Ask someone else." The girl in the black cocktail dress and screw-me pumps laughed and added, "Well, I guess you'll be in the traps all day." Fortunately, I was able to play it off as a joke. I doubt I'll spend the entire day in the traps. Few scratch golfers do. "Wow, are you considered a scratch?" asked Bob. "No, but that sounded wonderful." This resulted in another round of laughs. I didn't bother telling them that I was close to attending Q school before being hired by Barry. The topic returned to golf, and I was happy that I had not completely exhausted myself. Barry would not have enjoyed it as much if I had. Soon, the group dispersed, and I found myself back at the bar. "Would you like to buy me a drink?" I turned to face the owner of the small black outfit, who had crystal blue eyes. "No, but I'll buy one for the owner as an apology for my Freudian blunder." She laughed, and we talked for the rest of the night. When the celebration ended, she kissed me goodnight and went to her car. "I will see you at the golf course, sir. Just wait until you see what I'm wearing." I gulped hard as I envisioned her in tight shorts or a tiny skirt, reaching over to retrieve her ball out of the cup, I thought to myself as I waved goodbye. I assumed Barry and his wife Joan were off screwing whomever. The main reason they went to these events was to meet new love interests. I wondered if they ever banged each other, and I questioned whether Barry was genuinely the father of all of his sons, none of whom anyone had ever met. During my first month working for Barry, Joan propositioned me several times. In the end, my values and the fear that Barry would fire me triumphed, and I never took up Joan's offers. Truth be told, I was probably protected from a few social diseases. Wednesday morning, I went to the golf club and spotted the group in the back. The day was damp and chilly, so I expected everyone to wear long pants rather than shorts. I was born and reared in Wyoming. I wore shorts 90% of the time except while I was at work. Of course, half of the party attendees did not show up. When I walked there, they were figuring out how to divide 13 people. Bob greeted me. "Billy, darn glad you came." We expected 5 or 6 foursomes, but as you can see, we are considerably short of that amount. "Would you mind playing in a twosome?" I told him I wouldn't mind playing in a twosome. Lynn's absence at the event left me feeling deeply sad. I was told I'd be in a twosome with Jerry Montez, a commercial loan officer. However, when a member of the first foursome did not arrive at their planned tea time, Bob requested Jerry to join them. My new partner was still not present when the second group was about to take the tee box, just as Bob was attempting to figure out what to do. "Okay, Billy, here's your companion. Try to avoid the traps." As the gang started laughing, I turned to see my partner approach. "Sorry, I was held up on trying to buy teas." I turned and found myself face to face with Lynn. She wore a purple fleece pullover and heavy knit yoga pants, and the jumper concealed any cleavage. The pants truly highlighted her curves. "Where is everybody?" she asked. Bob speculated that the first group is most likely on green by now. "Would you mind participating in a twosome with Billy here?" She flashed me a wink. "Not as long as he brought some money." "Yeah, I forgot to tell you, we bet on everything." During a foursome, we usually gamble on drinks, stunts, or whatever else somebody wants to bet on. Bob mentioned that high-stroke counts cost people drinks at the turn. "I hope you brought enough money, Billy," she said. I did not say anything. Bob laughed as he teed up on the white box. He shot what appeared to be a good drive, and the foursome moved down the fairway. Lynn and I made our way to the tee box. Ladies first. I spoke as she bent over to place her tee. I was admiring Bum's figure as she bent over to prepare her setup. "Stop gazing at my bum, you pervert." Darn. Did she have eyes in the crack of her buttocks? I was not even glancing your way. I saw your buddy cutting away in the rough over there. She stood up and looked down the fairway where a man was swinging furiously in the deep grass about 100 yards away. She said, "I did not intend that. You are a perv, by the way. I just assumed that you were." "Yeah, you assumed I was staring at your beautiful bum. I understand." She gasped. "So you were. I'm going to have to keep an eye on you, Buster. Just to be fair, I get to stare at you as you tee up." I said, "Okay, I believe you can drive now. There on the green." She swung, drove the ball approximately 170 yards, and smirked at me. "Top that, Mr. Nice Dogs." I moved up to the black tie box and set my ball in tee. "If I can top that, what will I get?" I asked. "If you outdrive me from there, I'll play the back nine in my tight white shorts and tank top," she joked, wriggling her buttocks. I had never driven with a joyful little man below, so I was unsure how it might affect my swing. I gulped and addressed my ball. Then she began cheating, while I was aligning myself. She was commenting on my bum. Then she said I'd have to play the back nine in my underwear. Fortunately, I was able to tune her out and hit a 280-yard drive that curved around the dog leg and landed 50 yards short of the green. I turned and added, "I know your bum will look great in those shorts." All she could say was crap. Needless to say, I enjoyed seeing her play golf in her tight white shorts and tank top. I also did not pay for our first 3 dates. 3 months later, we were in an exclusive relationship. I learned early on that she thought Barry was a jerk-off. We were completing dinner when she inquired whether there were any women at my office, assuming she was concerned that I was roaming. I informed her that the sole woman was Jane, a 65-year-old grandma who primarily answered phones and prepared coffee. "I bet the weirdo admires her chest." "Anyway," Lynn replied, chuckling. When the picture of Barry checking out Jane's rack came to me, I laughed. I imagined her smacking him with the enormous pocketbook she carried around. Islands. Parents attended Thanksgiving. They traveled in from San Diego and spent a week with her. I met them on Thanksgiving morning, and we all ate the feast she and her mother had made after dinner. I volunteered to deliver her a slice of pie. Instead, I came from the kitchen with a ring on a pie plate and proposed to her. George Carlin once observed that people don't appear to get laid much around Thanksgiving. He was definitely not present that Thanksgiving. Lynn's parents returned to their hotel. She then continued to screw my brains out. We married on a yacht in Galveston the following May, and my parents gave me a house in an expensive Pasadena neighborhood as a pre-wedding gift. That way, even if you end up in divorce court, you will still have a place to live. Sonny boy, those were my father's wise words as he handed me the keys. I assured them that divorce was not in my future, but I appreciated their thoughtfulness. Lynn and I moved in after our honeymoon and settled into our lives for the first 4 years of marriage. I could never complain about our romantic lives. Other areas of our life, however, left much to be desired. Lynn and I got together. She barely made ends meet. I figured it was because she did not make much money as a bank teller. As the saying goes, when you assume, you make you and me. I let Lynn handle our finances for the first 6 months of our marriage. I assumed she was financially savvy because she worked in a bank. I was mistaken. It took me a year and a half to bring us back. Even after. I was continuously paying shut-off notices rather than utility payments. We had some lengthy chats and a few disagreements. I even spent several nights on the sofa. Our increases and my financial management eventually resulted in a healthy savings account, but it did not last. We were back at square one after 2 years. Her earnings covered the most of her credit card expenses. My salary went to pay for everything else. Barry didn't pay me nearly enough, so I was about to start circulating my resume around in the hopes of getting a better wage. But I knew most reputable agencies would not count. Small-time experience. The week that everything went wrong began like any other. After paying the bills, I was able to buy groceries for the week and fill our gas tanks. I even managed to save a few dollars in case they were needed. Work went on as usual Monday morning until Barry summoned Wolf to his office. I couldn't understand what was being said, but I could hear Walt's voice becoming more intense in minutes. They screamed at each other. The only thing I clearly heard was Walter telling Barry that Marion and Joan were both worthless, discarded for S, and that he wished Barry's tool would rust away. I had no idea who Marion was, but Barry seemed unconcerned about his wife being dubbed a 304, most likely because it was true. Walt rushed out of Barry's office. As soon as he approached me, he rushed to my desk. Barry was telling Jane to contact the cops. What? I got to my workstation and told Jacko, "You better watch your back." I was about to ask Walt what the hell I had done to him when Barry yelled at him to leave or he would file charges. Walt snarled at him, "Screw you, dick-lass son of a bitch." As he walked out the door, he said to Jacko, "You better watch your back for the rest of the day." Walt's remarks would repeat over and over in my head till I nearly was hit by a fast-moving truck. As I exited the beltway and onto the feeder, I was happy that his brakes functioned better than my head. Otherwise, I would have become a statistic. When I went home, the first thing I noticed was that Lynn was already there. She usually worked till 7. I stepped into the house and found her resting on a new white couch. When I left for work in the morning, the couch was not in my living room. Neither had a matching love seat or easy chairs. "Hello, baby," she said. "You like?" I took the day off from work and went shopping at the new furniture store in the Galleria. I fell in love with the set and purchased it on the spot. "Are you mad, honey? Were they free?" She scoffed, as if I had gotten a terrific bargain by opening a new account at the store. "I got us good payments." All I could do was smile. I knew that if I opened my mouth, a stream of profanity would pour, and we'd be fighting all night. Instead, I grinned and went into the den to find out how horrible she had made things. After I figured it all out, I knew I couldn't afford to accept a wage cut to start a new career. I despised the idea of having to slave for screwing Barry. The only benefit was that after Lynn purchased something like this, I received some kitten. After supper, we sat on her pricey buy and watched television. When I began making my moves, I began licking her earlobes and attempting to get a hand beneath her skirt when she stopped me dead in my tracks. "Lover boy, we're not doing anything on this couch. But if you take me to bed, you may take me back." She must have been a mind reader. I was pretty tired when I got to work the next morning. My head was still locked on Lynn's side while she lay flat on her stomach with a pillow. I had beaten her into a sweaty ball of whimpering jelly before I was finished. I was expecting her to call in late or leave work early. She typically did after a late-night love session like that. I was exhausted, but after a few glasses of coffee, I was full of energy when Barry arrived at work. He gave me a weird look as he walked to his office. I hadn't paid any attention to Barry, so the look meant nothing to me. 10 minutes later, a striking young lady entered the office. Jane greeted her. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes, I am Amy Stewart, and I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Mr. Barry Masters." Jane picked up the phone and spoke. Then she hung up, saying, "You may continue," and Miss Stewart pointed to Barry's office. I called Lynn later. She was at home. She was exactly as I had expected. "You didn't go to work, baby?" I asked her. I felt slightly annoyed, but also proud. I called in to say I would be late. She responded, "Someone wore me out last night." "Is that person ready to wear me out again tonight?" "You know who he is, baby," I said after a few minutes. We hung up. I was setting up an ad when Barry appeared with the young lady in tow. "Amy, this is Jacko. We nickname him Jacko since his name is too difficult to say. Jacko, this is Amy. She is taking Walt's place, and we will be following you about for the next few days." With that, he turned and returned to his office. "Bill Jackson. Penske. But feel free to call me Jacko." "Amy Stewart," she began, offering me her hand. I had an incredible desire to kiss it like in the movies. "May I call you Bill?" I told her she could call me Bill, and we set about our daily activities. I showed her the ropes while trying hard not to gaze at her. Percentage was exhilarating. Of course, I wasn't shocked that Barry had to keep coming out and poking his nose inside. I was apprehensive at first that Barry had recruited Amy because she was so attractive. She quickly established herself as a well-versed ad professional. I was perplexed as to why she would work for a shithole agency like Barry's when she could easily have been a star on Madison Avenue. I went home that night and screwed Lynn again. We did not pull an all-nighter like the night before, but we finished just as sweaty. I was rather clear-headed when I arrived at work the next morning shortly before noon. Barry called me into his office. I could see he was upset, but I had no idea why you screwed up, Jacko. I botched up. What? How? He pulled up an ad for a car lot where I had worked and showed me that they were going to hold a $500 drawing. I remembered the advertisement. When he showed me the ad, it stated that the drawing was for $5,000. Alan, who owned the lot, was furious and threatened to terminate his account. I calmed him down, and we are currently publishing a redesigned ad. Jacko, I really should fire you right now. But I've got a better idea. I'd want to meet you at your house tonight for dinner. I enjoy fish, by the way. I'd like to discuss this with you and Lynn before deciding what to do about you. I'll be there at 6 o'clock. I had no idea why the a-hole wanted to involve my wife, but I knew she despised him and would most certainly do all she could to spite him. I didn't give it much attention as the day progressed. "What does the loser want me to do?" I asked Lynn after telling her about my mistake and Barry's idea. "This dirty old prick probably simply wants to stare at your jugs for a while tonight, or asks us to join them for an exchanging party. Buddy, I'll chop your tool off before you screw Joan Masters. And if I ever encountered Barry Masters' bear, I would probably gouge my eyes out with a rusty spoon," she said, shuddering. I shivered. I would cut off my own tool before screwing her. Dinner was good. I was annoyed that Barry kept staring at my wife. I observed she kept shifting around to avoid giving him a good look at her figure. Even in the late spring heat, she donned a long-sleeved turtleneck sweater. After supper, Barry commented, "Okay, we had a great dinner." He stared at Lynn. "Very nice dinner, my dear." She blushed slightly before thanking him. He cracked his knuckles and continued, "I'm not sure if you know this, Lynn, but your husband almost cost me a large account today." I had to hold back a laugh. Lynn and I frequently discussed Barry's belief that he was the king of Madison Avenue despite running such a small business. I see no reason to punish him if it was saved because, my love, he needs to learn not to be distracted by the new young lady in the office and instead focus on his work. Lynn gave me a look as I scowled at Barry's comments. He knew I had never been anything less of professional. I had told Lynn everything about Amy as well. I may have downplayed her looks, but Lynn knew I wasn't interested. "What would you suggest we do to teach him, Barry?" "I recommend that we screw directly in front of him." I was stunned. My mind was telling me to go up and beat the living dog stuff out of Barry, whether I needed a job or not. Lynn appeared as if he had just asked her to eat a bucket of pig poo. I almost laughed at her disgusted expression. However, Barry appeared unconcerned. "That's a beautiful offer, Barry," she replied in a soothing tone. I was immediately aware of how ridiculous the idea of her ever giving in to him was. I knew she would shoot him down in flames. She went on to say that there are 2 concerns with your offer. First and foremost, I am confident that my spouse would divorce me immediately if I even considered it. Second, I only have eyes for him. I suggest we forgive, forget, and move on with our lives. He would not divorce you, Lynn. Most men fantasize about watching their wife bang another man. I do not, I chimed in. But Barry went on as if I hadn't been in the room. If he divorces you, my love, he will pay for you to live in this house until you decide to marry someone else. Then you receive half of the value from him. If he divorces you, I will fire him, and then he'll struggle to make the huge alimony payments you're entitled. My lady, you've got him over a barrel. Look, Barry, she said, I adore him, and I know he loves me. Why should I want to hurt him? You would not hurt him. You would merely be taking control. She appeared unsure, so he continued. Do you mean to tell me, Lynn, that you enjoy needing to get his okay before going out with your friends? You have to justify purchasing something nice for yourself. Are you telling me that you aren't even remotely prepared to have him crawl for you? Lynn, what I'm proposing will give you complete power over him. All you have to do is inform me he isn't following the rules, and I will ruin him. I can ensure that he never works in advertising again, and he'll have to work many jobs to remain out of prison, not to mention that it will dramatically boost your love life. Think about that, Lynn. You may have love at any time and with any guy you want. Jacko will soon realize that his affection for you goes beyond simply love. He'll be pleased to watch you realize all of your fantasies. When you do allow him to enjoy your body, he will be so grateful that he will go to great lengths to satisfy you. You can't lose Lynn. He's insane. I felt they were silly. I was curious what exact phrases my wife would say to shut him down. I was confident he would fire me once she fired into him, but it would be worthwhile. I'd also chase him down at night, ring his doorbell, and kick the heck out of him. Needless to say, I had the shock of my life when she asked, "What are we waiting for?" I just sat there shocked. I was expecting her to laugh and tell him he'd been sucked in. Usually, when Mom did that to me, she would use an ancient term like psyche. Even as they stripped each other, I expected her to end the prank. Finally, I became enraged and grabbed Barry by the scruff of the neck. Frog marched him out of my home. He was talking about firing me and suing me for assault. Lynn yelled from behind. "Darn it, Billy, you stop right there." "What?" "You cannot be serious, Lynn. I know you can't stand this scumbag." "I'm serious, Bill. You almost ruined his business and he isn't going to fire you, so this is the least I can do. You'd better stop this idiotic nonsense right now or I will." "You are what?" "Divorce me." "Fine. We'll get divorced, and you may work your bum off in menial jobs. I'm trying to keep my level of living high enough to keep you out of jail, and I will lock you up for putting your hands on me." Someone chimed in. "Barry, I was going to make things easy for you, but now you have to come in and keep an eye on our key. You will do nothing. You will sit back and accept it. You have no other options, cotton or jail. Come on, Lynn. Let me demonstrate how a real man treats a woman." I'd like to say Lynn came to her senses and threw Barry out on his rear. I'd want to tell you that when all was said and done, she laughed at his pathetic tool. Barry left, telling me to be on time for work in the morning. If I had not been broke, I would have acquired a pistol that night and dispatched it to specific folks to meet Jesus. Lynn exited the bedroom shortly after Barry left. I was seated on a new, costly couch. "Bill, you can quit sulking. It's over for tonight. Come to bed." "Screw you. I won't sleep in that bed again. I will sleep on the couch. I am pleased Barry does not turn you on. If he had you, you would have screwed him on the table and I wouldn't be able to eat." "Look, Bill, I'm sorry, but I do not know." He was talking about all of the power I'd have, which really aroused me up. "I think he is a filthy pig, but he had me so hot I was about to explode." "Yeah, the way you encouraged him and told him how terrific he was sure made you sound disgusted, and you told him he was better than me. That was completely out of line, unless you've been lying about how amazing I am, and there was no way he was bigger. Come on, Bill. He wasn't particularly little. Of course, the way you were behaving, I would have assumed you were screwing Long Tool McGee. Yes, I enjoyed it. Having power and shaming you turned me on. Seeing you humble and weak energized me. Even discussing it makes me horny. Come screw me, baby. I need it. I will not tell." Barry, enter 304. I can't look at you without feeling tricked. Anger and repulsion. No thanks. Come on, Bill. I'm sure Barry won't keep this up for very long. Once was too long. I'm still here, only because I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. I'm still here because I don't have other options, I said, trying not to cry in front of her. You have embarrassed me. I have to look at that loser every day now, knowing that he believes he is a greater lover than I am. I had to deal with the fact that he took the one thing in this world that I genuinely valued. I reclined on the couch, arm folded across my eyes. I heard her stumble towards the bedroom. I couldn't even think clearly. I knew there had to be a way out of this situation, but I couldn't see it. I arrived at work early and tried to get through my chores. I was doing fine until Barry entered and gave me a smirky grin. It took all in me not to walk over and crush his smug face. I wasn't sure how I was going to cope with the problem, but bits of a strategy were coming to mind. After a little internet research, I knew what measures I needed to take initially. I had to leave work early. This would be no problem. I also needed Lynn to be at work. She probably was because Barry didn't tire her out. I spent the most of my morning searching the internet for the tools I needed to turn the tables on my wife. I would lose my work, but not my home. I found numerous places in Houston where I could acquire what I needed. Around midday, I went into Barry's office and informed him that I was leaving. I never said you could depart early. He answered, yes, you did. I scheduled this appointment 3 weeks ago and informed you about it. Then I cleared this with you long before I scheduled the appointment. I was lying through my teeth. But Barry never remembered anything. Jane regularly duped him out of 3 weeks of vacation each year. He stared stupidly at the wall for a minute before saying, okay, yes, I remember. Go ahead, but you better be at home when I arrive this evening. What? Nobody ever uttered Jacko. It was set up yesterday night. Perhaps if you hadn't been sulking, you would have noticed. I'll also have a surprise for you. I know you despise me, but that only makes it sweeter. I don't dislike you, Barry, but I don't think I'd pee on you if you were on fire. 6 o'clock, Jacko, do not be late. Screw you, I murmured under my breath as I shut the office door. My first destination was an electronics store in town. I purchased numerous miniature cameras and mics. The store employee explained how to set everything up. He claimed they were motion-activated and transferred the footage to a secure website, ensuring that even if my computer was compromised, the films would be protected. My next destination was an attorney's office. Paris was the most unlikely name I'd ever heard for an attorney, but her reputation for assisting guys with marital issues was legendary. I gave her the entire narrative, including what I was doing to obtain evidence. She confirmed that I was not required to declare my espionage because I was the sole owner of my property. She encouraged me not to drop my bombs until she had everything ready for filing. She also told I needed to go through at least one more session to obtain evidence to back up my accusations. Under Texas law, I could divorce her for cruelty or adultery, and in some cases, both may be considered costly. She also provided me alternative options to consider. I could not wait to laugh in Barry's face. I went home to put up the cameras. I arranged 3 in the bedroom and 2 in the dining room. The remaining 2 I placed in the living room. I finished in time to move my garments into my office. I also got a pillow and blanket from the hallway closet. Lynn had only purchased them because they were on sale. That closet was filled with junk she'd purchased on impulse. After I put them in the office, I headed to a pub. When I arrived home at 9 o'clock, Lynn was sitting at the table, enjoying a glass of wine. I didn't say anything to her as I went in to take my first shower since moving out of my parents' place. I locked the bathroom door. I thought I heard the door rattle, but I wasn't sure. I laughed, thinking that I could still keep control of my life, and that she'd soon realize how little control she had. I took my time getting dressed and headed directly to my office. The door opened a few minutes later, and Lynn went in. I mentally added, "Purchase a lock set for the office door," to my task list. I had just logged onto my computer to examine how much evidence my cameras had collected during my absence. I hastily closed the window as she sat on the edge of my desk. My heart ached because she'd done it so often. She had perched in the corner of my desk several times to let me know she was horny. Horny was the last sensation I felt in my body. I only saw a traitorous 304 on my desk. She said nothing. She simply sat there staring at a point on the wall. I looked up at her and questioned, "What? Have you never shut me out of your shower before?" She said this with a sniffle. "You have never completely sickened me before. Were you coming to tell me about your great love for Barry? It was not excellent. She described it as horrible. I understood what a pig he is and that I was treating you incorrectly. I got you. I felt I had evidence of infidelity for my lawyer to use. He was upset that you weren't here." She proceeded. "I informed him that you had been called away for an emergency. I let him trick me into thinking it would be as good as last night, but it was horrible. So, basically, you both enjoyed humiliating me." I stated unequivocally without good old Bill to kick around. The thrill was gone. "Well, Boo, I thought you loved me," she whined. "I did, until you let Barry Masters get between your legs. She described last night as fantastic. All I want is to have that experience again, and you are a selfish brat that wants to refuse me. You're meant to love me enough to help me reach sexual nirvana. It does not harm you. Well, perhaps your ego, but it's such a turn-on for me." At that time, I recognized she was completely sold on Barry's bullshit. I told her one final time to get out of my office. Then I left the house. I drove around aimlessly for a while and ended up in Galveston on Friday night. I had a choice of any number of bars. I chose one that I had never gone to before. Lynn and I used to go down to Galveston frequently. We'd spend the day at the beach, then close a bar. While I was drinking, I noticed Hank Shell walk in. When I started, Hank was already working for Barry. He left to work at a local radio station. 5 years ago, he saw me and approached where I was seated. "Bill, I haven't seen you in a long time." "Hello, Hank. How is radio life treating you?" "I cannot." "Which? Are you still with that jerk, Barry?" "Unfortunate." "Have you heard that Walt left?" "No, I haven't seen Walt for a few years. Actually, he came to the station and asked me for a job. He told me Barry was ruining his life and that he needed to leave. Yes, I hear that. I know I am sick of his third-rate bum, just between you and me. I know Barry has driven away a lot of fine people. Heck, when I worked with him, he screwed 2 separate men's wives. Can you believe that nonsense? What always bothered me was that no one whacked his bum for it. At that point, his company came, and he bid me farewell before sitting with his friends. 2 dudes. Wives. I decided I needed to talk to Walt. Perhaps he didn't threaten me that day, but rather cautioned me before I left the bar. I asked Hank if he knew how to contact Walt. He claimed he didn't. So I left. I got home and passed asleep on the couch. I didn't see or hear Lynn, and I was quite okay with it. I was dying to chat to Walt. But in a metropolis the size of Houston, you simply cannot go door to door until the proper individual responds. The answer came to me right as I was falling asleep. Lynn was gone when I woke on Saturday morning. I went to Lowe's, purchased a lock set for my workplace, and installed it. I opened my computer's cameras and checked to see what they had recorded. I observed Lynn and Barry screw for around 5 minutes. Barry apologized repeatedly for not making her please. She assured him she was all right and that things would be better when I returned. Speaking of Jacko, she told him I wanted to slap her because she called me that. I tolerated it at work since I was paid to be there. I would not let her call me that. Speaking of Jacko, we might want to take it easier on him. Let us confine our activities to Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's fine, Barry replied. I usually have something on most nights. I only wanted to make Jacko sweat. We'll make him wear the surprise next time. Surprise? I accessed all of the video recordings and saw Barry enter the house with something in a bag. He told her how badly he wanted to pound her on the couch, but she rebuked him, saying no one would ever mess with her couch. He told her he'd brought my surprise, but because he and Lynn were so eager to find love, he showed her what was in the bag. As they ran along the corridor, I didn't have a camera in the hall, so the surprise remained just that. Horny? I replied, disappointed that I didn't know what the surprise was. I spent the remainder of the weekend avoiding Lynn, assuming she was home. I tried my hardest to be out and about. I spent Sunday evening at my office. She tried to tell me Barry had stopped by on Saturday evening, but the video exposed the truth. She had sat around, drinking wine and enjoying herself. The good thing about Barry is that he's entirely predictable. Every day, he leaves the office at 5 o'clock. He expects us to stay until 5:30. Jane departs at 10 and everyone else follows suit, leaving a deserted workplace by 5:20. On Monday, I found myself alone in the office at 5:30. I entered Barry's office and opened his computer. I knew his passwords because he asked Jane to write them down in case he forgot. I unlocked the top drawer on her desk and was greeted with not only his passwords, but also sticky notes to quickly jot them down. I was looking at Barry's personnel files on his computer. I received Walt's address and logged out. I also marked Barry's calendar as approved for a vacation day on Wednesday. I also noted that Jane had scheduled herself for a vacation the following week, as I was leaving. I thought I heard someone in the office, but I didn't see them. I had a short glance around before leaving. What did I stop at? A burger on the way home. Lynn disliked my eating fast food, so I could eat it in my office away from her. Tuesday went by fairly quickly. Barry came over that night, and I discovered my surprise. It was a metal cage intended to give me pain if my tool became too hard. It was also intended to stop me from fapping. Needless to say, if they anticipated me to be tortured by it, they were rather disappointed. I hadn't worn wood since the Barry mess began. Barry mentioned inviting Amy in for a threesome. I pondered how he got her into this situation. I got a kick out of hearing Lynn enter town with her delightful toy. I went to check what I had come up with just minutes after telling Barry about the study on Wednesday. I rang the doorbell after getting Barry's address from his computer. I could tell the woman who answered the door had previously been a really gorgeous woman. She still would be, but she appeared haunted. I could tell she was stressed out. I felt guilty after asking for Walt. The expression of remorse on her face as she informed me where I could locate him was heartbreaking. By the time I thanked her for her assistance and closed the door, tears were streaming down her cheeks. I almost said something soothing, but I realized I didn't know the circumstances, so I just went on with my quest. I found Walt exactly where she thought I would. He was staying in a room at a rundown motel near the interstate. Not even the hookers brought Johns to the dump, although it was probably a cheap place to stay. I knocked on the door. I was surprised when a disheveled version of Walt opened the door. He was dressed in a soiled wife-beater and cargo shorts that appeared to be 5 sizes too big. He backed away from the door as if he were a vampire, and daylight would kill him. "Jacko, what are you doing here?" "I tried to talk to you at your residence, but I was led here." His expression sank when he glanced at me. "Barry came to you, didn't he?" "Darn it. I should have warned you before coming, Guy. Heck, I should have risked incarceration to completely warn you in front of Barry." I entered the room that housed Walt. A droopy single bed sat in the center of the room, bordered by a tattered couch on one side and a small table and 2 rickety chairs on the other. "Jacko, some of what is happening to you is my fault. How can this be your fault, Walt? You left before Barry began his antics with me. Okay, let me tell you a story, Jacko. I knew Barry wanted to screw Marion from the first time he met her. It's just something about this guy. He has to do stuff like that. The woman doesn't even need to be attractive. I worked for Barry for 12 years. When I arrived, a guy named Jarvis was in your position. Jarvis and I were basically the team along with Jane Jarvis. I married a gal from Humble. Jarvis adored her, despite the fact that she was not particularly attractive. Barry attempted to make advances on Jarvis's wife 1 year at the bank's Christmas party. I left before it started, but I heard everything about it. Jarvis was nearly hospitalized. Barry. When we returned to work the next Monday, Jarvis was gone and Barry was still covered in bruises. Barry brought in Hank Shaw and subsequently replaced Jarvis with a college guy. I can't recall the name of the guy who succeeded Jarvis, but I know Barry talked to his wife and the guy quit. He was replaced, a man named Steve Harkin. A year later, Steve left. And did you replace Steve? I had heard that Barry had contacted Steve's wife. Barry had discovered out how to convince guys' wives to screw him without hitting his buttocks like Jarvis did. Unfortunately, I soon discovered how he was doing it, right after Hank quit. Barry brought me into his office and informed me that I had made an error on an advertisement. He had spent the entire morning convincing our client not to fire us and making amends with them. He said he talked about my future over supper. I was to accompany my wife and meet him at a nearby hotel. Scum sucker invited himself to my home for dinner. What happened? Did you mess up, by the way? What about motors? I unintentionally listed the wrong price for a car in the advertisement. Funny thing is, I don't recall ever revising the ad again. Regardless, the warning bells were ringing in my thoughts. Barry told Mary he wouldn't fire me if she agreed to cook me. He informed her that if I didn't work for him for 3 years, we wouldn't be able to survive. He screwed her 3 times per week. One night, I happened to run across Joan. I told her that Barry was cheating on my wife. I didn't realize they were swingers. Barry came over the next evening and told me that his wife had alerted him about our encounter. He then told Marion to stop using birth control. He claimed my punishment for trying to end his marriage would be to raise his slime sucker child. That morning in his office, I told him his BS. It had gone on long enough. He said he would decide when it was over. He informed me that after he knocked Marion up, he'd come after your wife. You know the rest. I'm living in this shithole while I divorce my wife. I'm not sure where I go from here, though. Have you divorced Marion? I asked. Not yet. I believe I can hurt her more by not divorcing her and never paying her alimony. I wish I had documentation to back up my adultery accusation when I left Walt. 10 minutes later, he was a happier man. I promised him I'd be in touch. I had told him enough about my plan to make him happy, but not enough to sabotage it. Should Barry catch wind of it? I felt good as I drove in a random pattern toward my house. It was early afternoon, and I had no desire to be home when Lynn arrived. As I turned onto a large street, I noticed a familiar image. I say, familiar. Even though I had never been there before, I had seen a photograph of it for the entire time I had worked for Barry. A large cartoonish sign reading, "And Motors," appealed to me. When I parked into the lot, I was greeted by 4 excited salespeople and a tall man with a handlebar mustache and a crazy 10-gallon hat. With the lead, we easily outpaced the other floundering ties. "What can I do for you?" he asked. With such a heavy accent, it had to be phony. "Name is Sam Colt. Which of these beauties can I place you in today?" Sam Colt. Are you kidding me? It's no surprise that many people assume Texans are dumb, I thought as he shook my hand. "Well, Sam, I was wondering what I needed to do to enter my name in the drawing for the $500. Okay, we do not give out $500. We never draw less than $5,000. You may participate for free by simply consenting to listen to a phone pitch, receive mailings, and join our mailing list. Alternatively, you can buy a car and receive 1 entry for every 1,000 spent at $530. I found myself entering my office. I now realized I'd been railroaded. I was furious and was hunting for proof to Barry. Barry. I intended to contact the prior 2 guys to whom Barry had done this. I searched through all of the personnel files until I located the 2 I was looking for. Steve Embry and Kenny Lawrence were easily found by accessing their colleges. Alumni data groups. I wasn't concerned about leaving an electronic trace because I was using Barry's computer. I checked my watch and it was just after 6 o'clock. I knew the cleaning crew arrived at 9, so I had time. I opened several financial files and started working on Barry's bookkeeping. I started hunting for receipts from amateurs. I discovered entries where every other client had compensated us, but no amateurs. I was eagerly searching Barry's computer for information. I heard someone inquire, "Have you found anything good?" I swung around and looked into Amy Stewart's icy blue eyes. I had been caught red-handed. I was at the workplace after business hours. I was on the boss's computer, and I had confidential files lying about. I was at a loss for words. Amy's expression was indecipherable. I had no idea whether she was going to rat me out or rape me right there on Barry's desk. Then, unconsciously, I did it. I confessed my guts to her. I told her about Barry frying me and destroying a few other marriages. I attempted to calm down. She rephrased the query. "Did you find anything to bury this scumbag?" Amy and I left the office before the cleaning staff arrived and went to dine at a little restaurant near her apartment. We exchanged notes, and by the end, she had told me her entire life story. I knew things that altered the scope of what I was preparing. In addition, I now had a crime partner. PM and Sons did not signify what I assumed it did. It denoted that Burkhart, Markowitz, and Sons, founded by Jefferson Burkhart and Jacob Markowitz in the 1970s, owned the advertising agency. When Jefferson's son and Jacob's 2 boys reached working age, they began working for them. After graduating from college, Dennis Burkhart decided he didn't want to work in advertising and joined the Air Force. Jacob's eldest son joined the firm, but his youngest preferred to pursue other opportunities. 5 years later, Jacob's youngest son was imprisoned for selling cocaine. During the court proceedings, Jacob's health deteriorated. He soon resigned from Beam & Sons, and his eldest son took his position. Meanwhile, after some dirty politics and rubbing court palms, Jacob's youngest son was free to resume his legal business, which he had allegedly used as a cover for smuggling cocaine into the Houston area. Jefferson was now heading the agency with Jacob's son, Barry. Barry changed his name from Markowitz to Masters to escape exposure from his drug-dealing sibling. Barry contacted Jefferson one day and told him that he had made a mistake with an advertisement and had spent 2 days kissing Baum and making things right in order to prevent losing a key client. He then used the mistake as leverage to force Jefferson out of the company. Jefferson's daughter, Margie, married Peter Stewart. Margie and Peter have a daughter named Amy. So Barry has been doing this nonsense for a long time. Yes, he has. My grandfather agreed that he messed up the ad, but it was no excuse for Barry to pull that garbage on him. Let me guess. The advertisement was for amateurs. Yes, it was. Do you know who owns the motorcycles? Alan Markowitz. I mentioned that before your narrative, I had no idea he and Barry were brothers, but I knew they were in collusion. I am. Does not pay anything other than material costs for their advertisements. Amy went on to tell me how many times Barry had asked her out on dates or to lunch. She'd turned him down flat every time, and she could tell he was becoming angry. I believe that's why he made me cease working so closely with you, Billy. After we had communicated all of our information with one another, we devised our strategy and called it a night. I arrived home around midnight and checked in on Lynn. She was sleeping with my old pillow, tucked in tightly as if spooning. I felt no pity for her. I felt better knowing I wasn't facing Barry alone. Amy was relieved that I had discovered so much, and that there was a way to get back at him. She had planned to put up with his nonsense for a few years until she had enough to take him down. I ended up receiving a respite for Thursday night. Barry instructed me to tell Lynn he was sorry, but he had a huge meeting and would be gone all weekend. Call yourself, loser, I thought to myself as he exited the office. I went home that night and mowed my lawn and played in the garage for a while. Lynn was wearing a new negligee as I stepped into the shower. "Would you like?" she asked me. I chuckled and replied, "You're wasting your time." Loverboy had a meeting and decided to cancel tonight. "You could take advantage then," she responded without hesitation. I just chuckled. "What's so funny?" she asked. "You think I want someone else's leftovers? That is a riot. What do you mean by someone else's leftovers? I'm still your wife." "Are you forgetting about the scary piece of garbage that was going to screw you over tonight? The same scum you choose to screw because humiliating me was a lot of joy. Go to hell. I don't want anything to do with your festering hole." She stomped off to the bedroom and I took a shower. I grabbed my pillow and sank onto the couch. She may have been upset since I didn't hear her toy until nearly midnight. The following morning, Amy contacted me at work. She grinned readily and asked, "Guess who has to work on the M Motors advertisement today?" "Is she larger than a bread box?" "Funny. I'd like you to review it after I'm finished. I'm sure Barry has a plan for me. Did you know he invited me to go to Florida with him this weekend?" I shake my head. "Yeah. I told him that I had plans. Then he became agitated and informed me that the AM Motors account was mine. Well, the jerk-off couldn't take it any other way, so he has to praise some power. He only hopes you don't stop. I'm not going to quit." "I have plans," she added, winking and returning to her desk after everyone else had left for the day. I reviewed Amy's work as she requested. It looked like every other motor we'd printed. I made copies of the information pages and photographed her at. "So do you have any plans for the weekend?" she asked me, ignoring the wife. I replied, "Plans. I have extra space if you wish to avoid her entirely. I'm not selling my body, but we could have a great weekend. We did having fun." My fun began when I ignored Lynn's protests while packing a backpack. I even packed work attire for Monday in case I decided not to come home till the evening. It sounded like an echo throughout our house. "Where will you be?" "Not here. If I could speak other languages, I would have told her more. Well, as long as she didn't speak them fluently. My grandfather had taught me a few swear words in Polish, but I didn't want to swear at her. She was crying as I walked out the door. I understand that people would call me a loser, but I couldn't remain with a lady who took joy in humiliating me. I intended to watch the entire surveillance video. I wanted to see her face when she called my cell phone and found it on the couch. Amy and I had a wonderful weekend when I arrived at her apartment. She came out with an overnight bag and instructed me to drive. After walking a few blocks, I asked, "Do we have a destination or are we just running away?" She laughed. "Yes, we're going to a friend's house. They own a home on Lake Conroe. Her pals owned a lovely home. I knew if Lynn saw it, she'd want to sell our house and get something similar. She had complained a few times about not living in the Woodlands or the Heights, but we did have a wonderful home." She had finally stopped wishing so much. We spent Saturday aboard their boat. I drank several beers with Tony while trying not to stare at Amy and Kathy in their bikinis. When Amy requested to water ski, I believe we were both hoping for a suit catastrophe that evening. Tony prepared the ultimate Texas barbecue. We had lots of food and beer. They had numerous more friends attend, and everyone seemed to have a great time. Amy introduced me as a buddy to everyone she knows. Tony and Kathy introduced us as Amy's friends. I was happy when one of the girls took Amy aside and told her she shouldn't let me go since I was a keeper. I spotted a serious expression on her face and made sure she didn't notice me glancing her way. We each had a room on Friday night because Tony and Kathy were hosting another couple who had driven from Baytown. They asked whether I would mind sleeping on the sofa so they didn't have to drive so far back. I didn't mind if I had stayed at home. I would have sat on the sofa regardless. Kathy left me to go fetch a pillow and blanket. I saw the couch was the same one that had taken up residence in my living room. I could hear Kathy speaking to someone. I couldn't understand what she was saying or to whom she was speaking, but I absolutely heard her say, "Okay, good night." Then I heard the bedroom door close. I sat and waited for Kathy to return, but instead, Amy emerged. "Hey, I have a full-sized bed. There's no reason for you to sleep on the couch, Billy. I trust you to be a gentleman." I took one glance at her and decided that arguing would be pointless, so I followed her to the bedroom. She wore a long t-shirt to bed, and I'm not sure if she was wearing panties or shorts below. I was wearing shorts, so I was not concerned about unwanted contact. "I trust you to be a gentleman." Those comments resonated through my thoughts as I awoke in the morning, Amy casually spooning me in my hand while clutching her right jug. I went to free my hand and she grabbed it. "Not yet, Billy," she said sleepily. She sighed and pushed into me harder. "I cannot wait. Cannot wait. Can't wait for what?" I wanted to ask. However, she had resumed her light, snoring. I awakened later, alone in bed for a few moments. I laid there, taking in her scent on the pillow next to me. I got up and showered. I found everyone on the deck eating bacon, eggs, and coffee. Amy had a big smile on her face as I sat across from her. We all made small chat while eating. I felt slightly embarrassed, and I kept noticing Amy staring at me. Amy and I left early in the afternoon. I thanked Tony and Kathy for their kindness, and Kathy assured me we'd see each other again. I chalked it up to them being wonderful people and didn't think much more of it. We spoke as we drove home. We reviewed our plan. I was confident Barry would make his move on Monday, and we discussed contingencies. If he attempts to force me to have love with him one-on-one, I'll just fire him. At that point, I will drop my bombs as well. I will not make you stand alone. I know you won't, Billy. I looked sideways as she mentioned that she was wearing a smile that I couldn't decipher. Then it dawned on me, she had been calling me Billy. I scanned my mind and realized I couldn't remember the first time she called me that, but I adored the sound of it. We returned to Amy's apartment, and I took her suitcase to the door for her. "Billy, you can remain here tonight if you want. I promise not to bite." Choosing between remaining with Amy and returning home to hear Lynn's BS. It was not hard at all. Amy gave me a weird look when I brought in my work attire. "Were we convinced that I'd let you spend Sunday night too?" she asked. I chuckled. Well, I had, but I was also ready to get a hotel room rather than listen to Lynn's nonsense. I had intended to sleep on Amy's couch, but she would not hear of it. I have a queen bed, but I only use half of it. We slept together last night, but nothing happened. So let's do it again. Her face wore a weird expression, but when she noticed me looking at her, she grinned. "I know you're still married, and I don't want you to go to her level." "Billy, you were a really nice person, but I'll admit that I enjoyed waking up in your arms this morning." We slept in basically the same clothes as the night before. I was in shorts and she was wearing a long shirt. However, we awoke in a different posture. I awoke to find her face in my chest and her legs slung over my hip. One hand rested on my chest. The other arm was wrapped around me. My arms totally surrounded her, and I was relieved that there was some breathing room in our crotches. I was in heaven. I wish I could hold her in that position forever, with the aroma of her hair filling my nose and her warm, soft body fitting perfectly with mine. I knew Barry had taken much more from me than just my wife. She'd been my friend and company. I wasn't sure what to do next, but I knew my relationship with Lynn was over. I'd never be able to look at her again without feeling humiliated and cheated. Amy seemed lovely, but I didn't believe she'd be interested in a person 7 years older and unemployed. I slept till Amy's alarm went off. We got up and took turns in the restroom. I took a shower first, then dressed while she was in the shower. I had planned on arriving at the office before Jane or anyone else. I was about to leave when Amy emerged from the bathroom, a towel wrapped around her hair and wearing a huge bathrobe. I felt little uneasy telling her I'd see her at work. There was something behind her expression, but I didn't know what it was. She grinned and instructed me to hurry. I arrived in the office 15 minutes before everyone else and finished my task in 5 minutes. I then made coffee and headed to my work. Everyone arrived within half an hour. Amy gave me a weird look as she approached her cubicle. Barry, of course, was the last to arrive. He went directly into his office without saying anything to anyone. After lunch, he contacted Amy, but I couldn't see or hear anything from Barry's office. Amy returned to her work about 20 minutes later. I didn't get a peek at her, so I had no idea how she was feeling. I did notice Barry had a spring in his step when he left because everyone else had departed by 5, and I waited for 10 more minutes before doing a few things and heading home. Lynn was not there when I arrived home. I threw all of my weekend clothes into the washing machine before heading to my office. I checked the CCTV cameras and discovered that Lynn hadn't left until that morning, when she went to work. I deleted the entire video of Lynn masturbating. I went back and listened to the audio in the 2 videos of Lynn using her phone. The first one was for her Aunt Lily. She didn't mention anything about our problems, so I skipped to the next one. I wasn't sure who she was speaking to, but I heard her say, "You what?" And after a pause, she responded, "That will be so hot. I need a hot night." I heard Lynn come home as I was finishing up, so I opened my web browser and pretended to be completely engrossed in some article in a few minutes. I felt her stare at me from the doorway. "Can we speak?" "You can," I told her. "I've got nothing to say to you. I missed you this weekend." "I didn't miss you." "Why do you have to be this way? Do I really have to remind you? You destroyed our marriage, and you think I am wrong to be a tad irked over it?" "I didn't destroy our marriage. Barry and I are making our marriage more fulfilling. If you want, I'll talk him out of making you wear your cage. When did you become such a dumb as Barry screwed all the brain cells out of you? The only thing fulfilling is me knowing what a tramp-screwing 304 I married. Get the heck out of my office. The only time we need to see each other or even acknowledge each other is while Barry is making your love fantasies come true. Other than then, I don't need or want to be reminded of your skank bomb. And that cage is just like you. Useless. I don't need it to keep me chaste because when you 2 scumbags are running, being turned on isn't even a remote possibility." As she walked crying out of my office, I got a text message from Amy. At least something could make me smile. Her text was short. "It's on." "Are you leaving here on time?" Barry asked me on Tuesday. "I have a few things to deal with, so I'll be out half an hour late." I told him Amy hadn't been at work. "So am I needing an extra half an hour?" Didn't look suspicious to him. "Fine, I will go eat at the Royal Fork, but I expect you and Lynn to be ready when I arrive. And Jacko, ready." As soon as everyone was gone, I packed a box with my personal belongings and wrote my resignation letter, and laid it on Jane's desk. I took one last look around and realized that I wasn't going to miss the place at all. I arrived home to discover that Barry was already there. I walked in and Lynn tried to kiss me, but I shut her down. She was wearing a short silk robe, and I could see she wore stockings underneath. "Where have you been?" I was worried. I didn't say anything and walked into my living room. Barry was sitting on the couch, sipping a glass of wine. "I've been waiting for 10 minutes. Jacko, a man who wants to keep his happy home and job, shouldn't keep the guarantor of both waiting, but have a glass of wine. We are waiting for a special guest." I saw a look passed between him and Lynn, and then I went into the kitchen and got myself a beer. Barry looked at me with a distasteful look on his face. I think he was about to say something when my doorbell rang. Lynn ran to answer it, and Barry got a crap-eating grin on his face. I heard Lynn greet someone and heard the door close. I looked up just as Lynn and Amy walked into the room. "Amy, I'm so glad you decided to save your job," Barry gloated. "You see, Lynn, Amy is as incompetent as Jacko is. She screwed up royally on my biggest account, and now she'll be joining us. Jacko, you get a treat even though you haven't earned it. You see, I am going to screw each of these beauties in front of you." Lynn suddenly looked worried, as beautiful as she was. She paled in comparison to Amy, and Amy was a decade younger. She also saw the way Barry looked at Amy. Well, let's get this hot evening started when Lynn called me Jacko. I saw a cross look pass over Amy's face. Barry looked slightly disappointed that Lynn was forcing the issue to go first. I know he was dying to get a piece of Amy as we all headed down the hall. I glanced at my cell and saw the text messages. I wanted to see just before we got to the bedroom. Amy asked where the bathroom was, and I pointed it out to her. She smiled and thanked me. I then noticed that she was carrying a small bag with her. I was ready to do my part in the evening's festivities. Lynn took off the robe to reveal that all she had on was a garter belt and stockings. I saw Barry's face light up, and I wanted to punch him as much pain as Lynn had caused me. I still couldn't deny that she had an awesome body. I took off my shirt and began to undo my slacks. Wait till Amy sees this. I said it like I didn't want them to hear, but I fully intended for them to hear me. Both Barry and Lynn's faces changed. Lynn's face went from lust to anger, and Barry's from lust to fear. I dropped my pants and stood there. Well, I am ready for my cage. I said. A new look passed over Barry's face. I have something better than a cage, he said, reaching into a shopping bag that I hadn't noticed earlier. He pulled out a pair of black leather shorts. These will make it impossible for you to pleasure yourself. He tossed me the shorts and I started pulling them on. You better hurry before that girl gets out of the bathroom, Jacko hissed. Lynn? Yes, Jacko. Save yourself a little embarrassing, it chimed in. Barry? I just couldn't let that go. You would know all about a little embarrassment, I told him. His eyes shot daggers. He was about to say something when the bathroom door opened and Amy stepped out. I thought I was going to swallow my tongue. I heard Lynn gasp and Barry groaned, and myself quickly pulled the tight leather shorts up, well, as quickly as I could. I think they were a size or two too small. I wasn't quick enough to keep Amy from seeing what I had to offer. Amy looked absolutely stunning. She wore a baby blue corset with black underwear that were trimmed in a lace matching the corset. Her marvelous cleavage would be enough to start a dead man's heart. Her sexy, tanned legs were bare all the way down to the blue pumps adorning her feet. The smile she threw me could have melted ice. Lynn caught the look and quickly said Barry. She saw Jacko before he pulled his shorts up. Barry wasn't really listening. He gave her a dismissive, yeah, and continued to stare, gape-mouthed at Amy. I kept expecting him to go all day vinyls and start touching himself. Barry, get over here and screw me. It's been so long since I've had a man, Lynn said. I almost laughed. She was doing her best. 2 things back on track. Barry snapped out of it and dropped his trousers. Amy almost laughed when his pathetic tool popped free. She mouthed, my God. And I saw the laughter in her eyes as Barry got onto the bed and started playing with Lynn's jugs. She squealed as if he'd hit her with a cattle prod. Meanwhile, I reached back and raised the blinds and lowered them twice. I turned to see Amy staring at me with a curious smile on her face. I winked at her, and her smile broadened. On the bed. Barry and Lynn were starting to get into their coupling. Then all heck broke loose. From outside came a series of small explosions living in an area surrounded by refineries. You hear explosions once in a while as the 6th one sounded. Amy screeched, "What was that?" I grabbed my slacks and pulled them on over the leather shorts and went rushing down the hallway. I opened the front door and yelled, "God darn, Barry, your car is screwed up!" All 4 tires were flat in the windshield and rear window were a mass of spiderweb cracks. Naturally, there was no indication of what had caused this to happen. Barry came running down my hallway bare and stopped as he got to the door. I never knew if the destruction of his Lexus caused him to stop or if he realized he was bare. It didn't matter because I put my foot in the middle of his back and sent him flying over my porch and onto my walkway. I then closed the door. I heard him yelling something, but I didn't care about that time. Lynn came out of the hallway. She'd at least had the good sense to don her robe before coming to investigate. "Where's Barry?" she asked. And then she noticed there were 2 other people in the living room. I had let them in when I yelled about Barry's car. "Who are these people? Jacko, what's going on? Are you Lynn Jackson? Penske, a lady in business attire?" asked when Lynn nodded. She asked if she could see Lynn's ID. Lynn produced her driver's license and showed the woman. The woman handed her a pack of papers and said, "You've been served." Lynn's face turned white. She looked at the papers in her hands in disbelief. Amy came out the hallway with Barry's clothes in the shopping bag. She had put the clothes back on that she had worn to my house that evening. The process server bagged me a good evening and headed out the door. I stepped out and immediately looked for Barry. Barry was trying to hide on my porch. People had gathered to see what the commotion was all about, and they were laughing at Barry. The process server approached Barry and asked, "Are you Barry Masters?" Amy stepped out on the porch. "Yes, he is. Here's his ID." The server handed him a stack of papers, "And you've been served." I could swear she was laughing as she walked away. Amy dropped the bag of his clothes by him. "You screwed up," Jacko Barry hissed. "I'll get you for assaulting me." "Barry, that process server saw you go running out and fall on your own. Read the papers, buddy boy. You are the one who screwed. You're fired. Jacko, don't bother coming to work tomorrow." "Screw you, Barry. Jane already has my letter of resignation." I was about to say something else when the police pulled up. Barry screamed at them that I had assaulted him. No one else would corroborate his story. So all they ended up doing was writing him a citation for indecent exposure. I was disappointed that the tow truck got there for Barry's car before he looked at the paperwork he'd been handed. I went back inside to find Lynn sobbing on the couch. "Where are you going, Lynn?" "Going? I don't understand. Where are you going? I do not you here anymore, and I'm not leaving, Bill. Baby, I don't want a divorce. I love you, and only you. Unfortunately, you don't love me. If you did, we wouldn't be here. You got all hot and horny thinking about humiliating me and screwed Barry. Our marriage was over at that very second." "But you'll lose everything Barry told us. Barry was full of crap, Lynn. I own this house. It was in my name before we married, so it's mine. I have filed using adultery and cruelty as caused. My attorney says with what I have provided her, I shouldn't lose much in this divorce. We did drop in irreconcilable differences paper. If you just want to sign it and get this done, it offers you 30% of our assets, and I take none of your debt. Cruelty." "How can you claim cruelty? You screwing that or what? Barry in front of me and humiliating me constitutes cruelty. I have all of it on video. I also have you and Tiny Tim on video while I'm not around. But you'll need my income now since Barry fired you. That's none of your concern. Now, if you need help, I'll carry your crap to your car. But you need to hurry. Amy and I are going to screw on the couch for a while." Lynn went screaming out to her car and left over the following weeks. She'd slowly move her stuff out. She had moved in with one of her fellow tellers that had needed a roommate to help with her costs. We ended up splitting our assets 70. Luckily, I didn't have to use my videos against her. The only request she had was that I take the furniture. I saw Lynn a couple of years later. She had put on weight, but still looked good. She had a guy on her arm and they were pushing a stroller. I don't think she saw me and I was fine with that. I tracked down all of Barry's former employees of the 7 I talked to for join my class action sexual harassment suit. Both Steve and Kenny were more than enthusiastic and even Jane joined Walton. Marion also signed on. Marion didn't ask for a full cut, but she wanted to testify. When Joan realized that Barry was going to get hit hard, she tried to file for divorce, hoping to get her half before he was strung up in blood. When it was pointed out that she was a party to Barry Philanderer, she was told her assets split would come after the harassment suit was settled. During the harassment trial, investigators found inconsistencies with Barry's. When they delved in a little further, they found large amounts of unexplained income for BM and Sons and Motors, along with copious amounts of cocaine. Alan skipped town just before the DEA could arrest him. Barry was arrested right outside of the courtroom. Joan was arrested later and had 5 ounces of cocaine on her at the time of arrest. After the lawsuits were settled, the government took everything Barry, Joan, and his brother had left. We all walked away with $200,000 in winnings from the suit. Barry got 30 years and Joan got 10. Alan later turned up in a meeting in Columbia Dumpster with his throat cut. On the night that Lynn was handed her papers, I told her that Amy and I were going to screw on her couch. I truly had no intention of screwing Amy, but I knew that the thought of the two of us staining Lynn's white couch was rubbing salt in the wounds. Amy had known beforehand that I was going to tell her that I wanted desperately to, but the leather shorts wouldn't allow it. So I leaned on the back of the couch, whatever I had been running on. Up to that point evaded me, the weight of everything suddenly bore down on me, and I felt like collapsing into a heap and letting the world pass me by. I had no wife and no job. I banking on a lawsuit victory, but who knew how long that would take? A future that had seemed so bright just moments before suddenly looked dark and foreboding. I was standing there crying when Amy put her arms around me. I felt like a moron crying in front of Amy, but she didn't seem to mind. "It's all over, Billy. She can't hurt you any longer." After a while, I started feeling better, and I noticed that Amy was back in the corset. "When did you change back into that?" I asked her while you were kicking the veil. "Which how do you like it?" I almost told her it was wrong to show me what I couldn't have. But I had a Freudian slip and said, "Like it." "Not at the moment. It's reminding me that I have these darn shorts on." "I can help with that," she said. I've expected her to put her clothes back on. Instead, she started unbuckling my belt and sliding my slacks down. I must have had a quizzical look on my face. "I want this, Billy. I've liked you since the first day I met you. When Jean told me about what Barry was doing, I knew I could end up with you. Last weekend was the best weekend of my life, and I want all of my weekends to be like that. Well, at least the waking up with you parts. I had no idea you felt Jane knew. How the heck did Jane know?" She smiled. "Jane is my aunt. She's married to my Uncle Dennis. She started working for my grandfather and Barry's father before she met my uncle. She did her own name change on her personal records, so Barry never added 2 and 2. Walt had called her after he left and told her to watch out for you. She was listening over the intercom when Barry invited himself to dinner. That's why she kept Barry's password so readily available. She also told me what a great guy she thinks you are," she said as she kissed me. Before I knew it, the tight leather shorts were on the floor. So even though I thought I had lied to Lynn about Amy and I screwing on the couch, Amy made sure that was honest. When we got tired, we went back to her place to sleep. Neither of us wanted to sleep on the bed. Barry had screwed Lynn on Amy, and I took our lawsuit winnings and bought a house near Tony and Kathy. I hired a company to manage my house for me. They keep good renters in it and see that it's taken care. Amy didn't mind me holding on to it. She saw it as kind of a security blanket for me that she never intended for me to need. Amy and I are part owners of a large advertising agency. Her Uncle Dennis went in on it with us. It is the kind of place that Barry ran in his wet dreams. Walton, Jane, both work. Jane just likes having something to do. Amy and I share the responsibilities of day-to-day operations. We are never in the office at the same time, though. When one of us is at the office, the other is at home with our 2-year-old son, Jefferson David, who is named after his great-grandfather, and my father and our 5-year-old daughter, Sadie Marie, who was named after our mothers. The best part is getting to wake up spooned with the love of my life. Her body only improved after having the kids, and she never lets me doubt her love for me. I truly can't ask for anything more, and life goes on. Thank you for taking the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this essay, please like it and subscribe if you have not already. If you have a story to share regarding your or someone else's situation, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.